Hello Internet, it's Drew. Welcome back again. This is part 2 of the monster damage video, wherein I try desperately to explain how to fix the problems I outlined in the previous video without coming off like a crazy, like the meme of the guy from It's Always Sunny with, Pepper Sylvia, that thing. It's going to be kind of tough, but bear with me because I think I can do it. So let's jump straight in. Just to recap, our goal here is to come up with damage values for our monsters that challenge the amount of hit points that our player characters have. There are 4 rough types of PCs inside of 4th edition, and our average player character in 4E happens to be the type 2, the Rangers, Rogues, and Monks. They have the average value of hit points, and we work that out all the way down to level 30. Right? So at level 30, you have 171 hit points, and at level 1, you have 24. That's your average PC. If you have a set table, then obviously, use your player's actual hit point values to come up with the average, right? Don't do this. This is me like doing a more like a system-wide, like a game design type approach. Right. We know how many hit points our PCs have. So you might recall that, I said there was this sheet. Doing this set of videos, I've kind of come to realize that there are actually, quite a few problems with it. The main problem is that like level 1 damage is super, super lethal. And it's really punishing for these first few levels. And the damage tails off as level goes higher. So like a level 30 monster is much less threatening to a level 30 PC than a level 1 monster is to a level 1 PC. And what we actually want is for damage to be kinder at low levels so that it gives new PCs a bit more leeway, but for things to become more and more punishing as level increases. Let me take you straight into spreadsheet hell. This is going to be one of those videos, right? This is a breakdown per 5 levels of the Sly Flourish numbers from this sheet here. Interesting trick, by the way. You can work out the average of any dice roll by taking the maximum possible of the dice roll, right? So let's say 60-10. The maximum is 60, halve it, 30, and then add half the number of dice you rolled. So the average of 60-10 is 33. That will work out the average at every time. So that's the formula that I used here, right? That's all that this is. It's just multiply this by this, divide it by 2, and then half this. So yeah, your average here is 6.5, and it just goes up like that. And then I work that out as a percentage of the total hit points, which are here. Right? So immediately we can see that at level 1, the weakest hit that a monster can do here, this low damage average, the average of the weakest hit is about a quarter of the player's health. And you can see that it scales down as level increases. And by the time we get to level 30, it's 17% instead of 27%. So it's gone from a quarter to about a fifth or just under. So the monsters are getting less and less threatening over time. Likewise, the crit is almost 40% of the player's health at the low attack, and it scales down to 23%. So these monsters are getting less threatening as level increases. The trend continues across the medium, the high, and the extreme damage. And here is the most egregious thing, right? Like you can see that an extreme damage hit at level 1 averages just over half the player's health and maxes out at 2/3. You're going to lose 16 of your 24 hit points if a monster crits you with its hardest hit at level 1. That's extremely unforgiving, very punishing, right? But look at what happens there. You're going to go from 2/3 to 40%. So by the time you get to level 30, this monster, even the biggest hit that a monster can possibly do to you, is not even taking half your health. Right? So this is what I mean. These numbers scale down. The monsters become less threatening over time. And if we look at minion damage as well, we can see exactly the same trend. The minion at level 1 does 5 points of damage. That's 20% of your hit points. By the time you get to level 30, it's only doing 11% of your hit points. So there's our trend. Our monsters are becoming weaker and weaker as level increases. And I even made a nice chart where you can see it. I'm a huge nerd. I don't apologize for it. But you can see here, right? The red and the yellow line at the bottom, that's the monster damage, and the blue line is the PC hit points. So you can see it's just not keeping up. It's way too flat. There's, the PC hit points are scaling up, and the monster damage is very flat. And there's also, I'd argue, a second problem emerging here. When you visualize stuff, you can see it a little better, right? Second problem emerging here is that the crits are not distinct enough from the hits. They're just a little bit more. Like a crit of 60 when your hit is 50. It doesn't feel that special, right? When you get crit, it should be a big deal. So what did I do to fix this? What I did was change the way that these things scale. So now we can see, like on the Sly Flourish sheet, the hardest hit that a monster can do at level 30 is 48 plus 39. My hardest hit is 60, 10 plus 31, right? That's quite a bit higher. We can see now, like the lowest hit that a monster can do now is 23% at level 1, and that stays around about, but it kind of drifts up to 27% at level 30. So at level 30, the monster is more threatening than it was at level 1. Same thing with the crits. They all kind of come up as well. I've managed to make this work across all of the different damage types. So we start, for medium, we start at 27%, end up at 31%. High, we start at 27, we end up at 34. Extreme damage, we start, this is the one that I pay the most attention to, because if you unload an extreme damage attack on a player who's low in health, then you're kind of dancing with death to begin with, because that's the biggest thing that might actually accidentally take a player straight to negative bloodied and kill the PC, right? So, you always had the choice to just not use that attack on that player at that particular point in time. But on the other hand, if you're trying to be ruthless, then that's exactly the kind of thing that a monster would do if it wanted to win, if you're playing like a very intelligent enemy. So let's see. Starts at 31% and kind of hovers around this. There's a few irregularities because of the way that I've chosen to scale the dice, and I'll show you that in a second. I found a model that scales up that is also easy to remember, right? Like it's possible to go through level by level and finesse this very down into like, this is 2d12 plus 7, and then the next one is like 3d8 plus 5, and it kind of like, they're all different, and you can make the curve fit really nicely. But I think it's better to have something that we can all remember very easily, and that works according to a system. And that's what I did. So we've got a few irregularities here where we jump from like 39 to 45 to 48 to 51 up to 59. Level 25 is like the most lethal. But again, I don't think that's a problem. It's just over 50, just over half. The biggest hit a monster can do is bloody you in one hit. That's about where it should be. So here we can see that all of the level 1 percentages are lower than the level 30 percentages, and that stuff generally trends upwards as level increases, right? Stuff is becoming more dangerous with a few exceptions. And also like the minion damage scales up as well. So it starts at 13% and ends at 19% instead of going downwards. Visualize the chart looks like this. Now you can see these noticeable jumps. Let's compare the two. See this big gap, 57, 71, 171. 64, 91, 171. So we're just over half, right, of on a crit. And it kind of like these lines, the red and yellow lines, trend upwards much more and keep pace with the player's hit points. To show you then in detail, diving in a bit more, this is what I did. If you want a low hit, you use a D4. If you want a medium hit, use a D6. If you want a high hit, use a D8. If you want an extreme hit, use a D10, right? And then every 5 levels, add an extra die. That's the system, right? So see, 1d4 up to level 6, 2d4 up to level 11, 3d4 up to level 16, 4d4, 5d4, 6d4, right? Means you end up at 6. This pattern follows the same the whole way through, and the only thing that I had to do a little bit was to use this static modifier to kind of bring things in line. We can boil all of these dice rolls down into formulae, right? Like mathematical formulae, which you can just put into Roll20 or whatever. You'll notice that everything scales off the player's level. This is actually not just one. What it's doing is the ceiling, so it's rounding up, of the level divided by 5. Now, what this means is that 1 divided by 5 gives you a decimal, and it rounds it up to 1, right? So this will keep going until you get to 6, because 6 divided by 5 gives you 1.1. So that rounds up to 2, right? And so on and so on. 11 divided by 5 gives you 2 point something, rounds up to 3. That means that you can tell your VTT or whatever, you can say, okay, my party is level 10. That means I want you to divide 10 by 5, which gives me 2, and that's the number of dice I want you to roll. That means that you can scale everything off this level value. And likewise, the static mod also scales off this level value. This is just level plus 2. Right, the whole way up. So you'll see it's like 3 for level 1, 4 for level 2, 5 for level 3, all the way up to, 32 for level 30. That's all that it is. And I found that this static mod worked for low and medium, right? We could just do level plus 2 and the same scaling on the dice for all 4 types. But that when I got to high unlimited, using the D8 and the D10 scaled a bit too aggressively. I ended up with values that were a little bit too high. And you can see that, right? Like if I change this to 2 and I copy this all the way down, then we can see the high damage. Oh, this is the other thing, right? Like probably I should have said at the start, you need to decide what you think these values are, right? What these hits should represent. Now, I have taken, a rule of thumb that low damage should be about 25 to 35% of your PC's health. Medium should be 30 to 40, high should be 35 to 45, and extreme should be 40 to 50, right? And then I tried to come up with dice rolls and mathematics that would land me in those ranges. I felt that it was getting a bit too spicy. We're getting up into 50s here. I've even got this thing that works out the average. So 34 and 47, it's still not terrible. You could totally leave it. It will probably be fine, right? But the other thing is that you want a noticeable difference between high damage and extreme damage, and between low to medium to high to extreme. 29 to 38 damage and 33 to 46 damage. It's noticeable. It's fine. Like, it's probably fine. Actually, looking at this, we could probably just do the +2 and then see, for everything. Yeah, so we're averaging 38% on a normal hit and 54% on a crit. Again, maybe that's fine. Looking at it, that's fine. But this shows you like how you can start tweaking the numbers once you've done this kind of thing, and you've got it like a spread. I'll share this spreadsheet, obviously, like you guys can make copies of it and play with it. But once you have this kind of thing set up, then you can start tweaking these numbers and turning these dials, and you have access to this stuff, right? It's accessible and it's surfaced, and you can start messing with it and go, okay, well, how much do I want this thing to scale? Do I want this to scale every 4 levels instead of every 5? I could do that. Or every 6 levels, if I want it to scale less aggressively. It looks like a lot of work, and it kind of is, but the rewards are that you get complete control of what's going on in your game. Let's have a look at where we've ended up. Yeah, this looks fine. 13 on a crit of 24 hit points at level 1. They're not going to lose 2/3 of their health on one hit. They're going to lose just over half, right? So and the trend kind of like goes all the way up. This is much better scaling, in my opinion, of the damage in your game. So, great. We've done that. Now let me tell you how to take this and actually put it into, something like a VTT. I use Roll20, but I'm sure there's ways to put this into Foundry to whatever. Like the formulae that I have here, actually, let me update these because we decided that +2 was fine. So that makes it nice. That means that our static mod is the same across all types. So yeah, your low damage is the ceiling of the adventure level divided by 5 D4, that number of D4s, plus the adventure level +2. And then the same thing, medium damage is the exact same formula with D6s, high damage is with D8s, and extreme damage is with D10s. And, if you wanted to be more lethal, you could start at D6, go to D8, D10, and then end up at D12s. If you wanted to. You could scale the static mod harder. You could start at AL +4 instead of AL +2. If you wanted to do it that way, you could scale it back the other way if you want, a less lethal game, if you have very inexperienced players and you're worried about that. This gives you that level of control. This is the keys to the kingdom, as far as like designing your monster's damage. And it means also that the mystery of things like challenge rating, of the inconsistencies in the printed material that we saw in the previous video, all that stuff goes away because you just use this, right? Like you've got your own stuff that you can just rely on, and you know that it works because you've done the mathematics and you've worked it out against the PC's hit point totals. Putting that in Roll20 code, this is what this looks like. So the low, this is just using the Roll20 die rolls. Seal is the Roll20 equivalent of sealing. So seal at AL, this is a very important thing. I'll explain this in a second. I'll show you how this is implemented. But basically, you're going to have an attribute inside of a central character sheet, and it's going to have a box on there called AL, which you put in the adventure level, which means that when you change that one value, all of your formulae will scale. You can suddenly have, like, everything runs at level 8, everything runs at level 10, everything runs at level 20. If you want to, you just change that one number and everything just updates itself instead of you needing to go through and change a million journals or whatever. I know that probably a lot of people just run pre-made stuff. But again, part of my goal with this channel is to encourage homebrew, is to get people to wean themselves off of being dependent on stuff made by others and understand that you can do this stuff too. For people that haven't thought about it, it's not actually all that hard. You just have to work out how to break this stuff down. The way that you use this is that, an extreme hit would be something like a gigantic storm giant smashing you with its hammer. You don't give the extreme hit to the goblin, with a rusty dagger. The goblin with the rusty dagger is going to do low damage, but there's going to be like 5 of them all trying to stab you at once. So you know that your goblins are going to do an average of 25% on a hit. That means that you can field 3 to 4 goblins per PC and know that it's likely the PCs are going to survive one round because the 3 goblins can't actually do enough damage to take the PC down to 0 hit points. I have 4 PCs, that means I can field 12 goblins, and the PCs are guaranteed to survive the first round, which means the PCs have a chance for counterplay. Probably, kill a couple of the goblins on their turns, they'll get some healing. It means that the next amount of incoming damage is not going to be as severe, and the PCs are likely to win that encounter, right? Do you see this, the level of transparency control that this thing gives you? So yeah, this is what the formulas then look like for Roll20. This is my Roll20 campaign, and I have a journal, a central journal called Core, which contains all my monster maths. And inside Core, I have an AL attribute here. Currently, that's set to level 10. I was running a level 10 adventure, obviously, last time I was using this. And here you can see that I have other attributes which contain the damage expressions, which I've generated here. So what this means is that all of my monsters, instead of using raw dice rolls inside of their journal sheets, they call these damage expressions from the core journal. Every single monster in my entire Roll20 all scale when I change this number, right? So if I change this to 20, suddenly every monster in my thing is level 20. All of everything else scales off this as well, like their attack rolls, their saving throws, like everything scales off this central number. But we're talking just about damage in this instance. But this is what I meant, when I said in the last video that this could save you a lot of time, because you don't need to sit there and like macro individual stuff and worry about all the dice rolls and all that sort of stuff. It's all centralized and it's all systematized, and it all just scales because you change this one number. So let's leave this at level 10. And, I can just copy this entire thing, this expression, and just pop it into chat here. And that's what it looks like, right? Ceiling of the AL, which is 10, divided by 5. So that'll give you 2d4 plus AL plus 2. So 2d4 plus 12 plus, and then I've got a little prompt saying, hey, do you want to add any extra damage bonuses on there? And that means that I can just call these macros from the monster sheets. So, to give you an example, if I call this inside of double brackets to say, roll this, turn it into an expression, it will then go and calculate this. We'll actually go and roll this. So we can say, okay, it's asking me, do you want to add some damage bonuses? But let's say we don't want to in this case. We're just going to roll that, and there we can see 2d4 plus 12. Right? And then let's look at our thing for level 10. The low damage for level 10 is indeed 2d4 plus 12. Provided that you work your formula out like this, they will actually just roll in Roll20. And indeed, let's open up like a random monster here from my Dragon Hope Adventures. Let's look at Captain Gorgrin, the orc. And, if we look at his MBA macro, you can see indeed this is where we're working out how much damage he does. It just calls this macro over here, which then uses this AL value, right, to decide how hard it should scale the damage. That's how you can actually reverse engineer the damage, scale it based on the adventure level, on the level of the PCs, and implement that into a VTT like Roll20, so that, it will scale automatically based on you changing one number. And I feel like that's, a much saner way of approaching this problem. We don't have to worry about it anymore because now we're in control. Probably one of the deepest dives, one of like the nerdiest types of videos that I'm going to do on this channel. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helps, right? Like those of you who are struggling with this problem with monster damage, I hope this spurs you to take charge and take control of the thing yourself and get rid of the headache. It took me a long time and a lot of work to get to this point and to understand this. So I'm hoping that I can just share this and, it shortcuts a lot of people past all that heartache and misery. The other thing I should say, full caveat, is that I haven't play tested this stuff yet, but I think based on my previous experience, I'm pretty sure it's going to work. I'm pretty sure it's going to be in the right ballpark. And the important thing is that if it's not, if it's too weak or it's too strong, I now have the means to correct that. That's a lot different to just groping in the dark and hoping for the best, which is where I started. So, okay, that's it. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye. So that your PC's